Welcome this afternoon to the Ocean Future Society Virtual Film Festival live presentation for Keiko Gate to Freedom. I'm Jim Knowlton, I'll be your host. The Ocean Future Society Virtual Film Festival is a new platform where we get to present classic Ocean Future Society films, such as Keiko, Born to be Wild, Keiko Gate to Freedom, My Father the Captain, Jean-Michel Cousteau, and Swain's Island, one of the last jewels of the planet. So, our presenters today are Jean-Michel Cousteau, President of Ocean Future Society and the Executive Producer of Keiko Gate to Freedom, and Jeff Foster with the Whale Sanctuary Project, who was also the Director of Field Operations and Research for the Keiko Project. They will discuss parts of the film this afternoon, and then after about 30 minutes, we'll take your questions. I will present them, and we'll have about 30 minutes of a Q&A. So thank you all for joining us. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but we are excited to broadcast live this afternoon. I'd like to welcome Jeff Foster and also Jean-Michel Cousteau for our talk today.
Hi, Jim. How you doing? And hi,
I'm doing great, Jeff. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're bringing Jean-Michel on right now. He's going to start his camera.
Yep.
Hey, there we go.
Hi, Jean-Michel. Good to see you. Last time we were together, we were chasing whales in Russia or trying to rescue them.
That's right.
Yeah, did a good job of that.
Right. Well, it was for me a great pleasure and an honor to be able to share with this difficult time that we have to go through information, and very important information that we want to share with the public as much as we can. And I'm happy to say that when I created Ocean Future Society, I did it to honor my father's philosophy, and we've been going on with our team nonstop ever since, and we'll never stop. And I've been diving 75 years. I will continue to do that, and to do everything we can to protect what every one of us depend upon, and which is the ocean and what's in the ocean. And, you know, I'm here in Santa Barbara right now, it's pouring rain, and that rain is the ocean coming on top of us. So for me, it was a very great pleasure to be part of this program, and to have the honor of having Jeff join us. I want him to let us know about what he experienced and what he can do and continue to do thanks to his dedication to protecting what we all depend upon. Jeff, please share with us.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate enough to be a part of the Keiko Project, and from pretty much all aspects of it. I started off actually meeting Keiko down in Mexico City just after the movie came out, and saw him there and realized that he was in the same situation he was in the movie. It was really a tragic situation, a really small pool, and I followed him from there, and then eventually started work with the Free Willy Society, and then eventually Ocean Futures, where I joined the team with Jean-Michel and Charles Vinnick. And that was quite an adventure. You never know what to expect when you're working with these animals, and especially in a wild environment like Iceland. So every aspect of it was challenging. We started with not knowing a lot about these animals in the wild, especially the North Atlantic animals. And so what we were tasked to do was to try to train Keiko to survive out in the wild and integrate into a group of animals and hopefully be with them the rest of his life. So we didn't even know where the starting point was. So there was a lot of research that needed to take place to find out how deep these animals typically dive, when they're foraging, and what their movement patterns were and everything else. And so there was lots of pieces to this puzzle. And not only was it just, trying to move a whale and trying to do the right thing by Keiko and trying to repatriate him back to the wild, but we also learned a tremendous amount in the process, and that was super exciting.
Well, Jeff, I'll tell you, when Keiko was captured and taken away from Mexico and taken all the way to Iceland. It was 23 years ago, and most people don't realize what has happened since then. But we made a lot of progress, and I'm so glad to know and be connected to a very good friend of ours who has been very much involved with the Keiko Project and is now totally dedicated to the Whale Sanctuary Project, which is going to allow a lot of dolphins and whales to be put back into their natural environment. And that's because of education, because of young people telling us that we need to stop putting them in jail, and on and on and on. And I'm very, very excited about that. And I suggested that we present our shows from where we started. And we have little pieces of stories to share tonight. And hopefully people will want to see the shows completely. But the second show on Keiko that we put together with the Whale Sanctuary Project, that was great. And now with our project with Keiko, the film is the gate to freedom. Could we have that?
We've come with Keiko to southern Iceland, an unpredictable land of fire and ice and water. Westmannaeyjar is an archipelago of raw islands in the North Atlantic, geologically new, formed by violent eruptions. It's a place of few people, surrounded by the sea, and near where Keiko was captured 23 years ago. Our best hope is that Keiko will be accepted into a pod, a small group of whales that stay together for life. Every spring and summer, hundreds of orcas come back here to feed on migrating schools of herring in one of the most abundant and still pristine parts of the ocean, with whales just offshore from where we've brought Keiko. For now, his home is a bay pen where it's up to us to teach him to be wild again and to depend on himself, not us.
Well, the whole idea there, obviously, is to share with the public as much as we can. The fact that Keiko would be in jail for a long time, now in the Bay Pen, is connected to the real environment, to the real ocean. And we wonder, is he allowed to connect with other sounds of dolphins in the area? How is he doing? And our team, so dedicated, was trying to really help to make sure that Keiko was adapting to that environment. We had been removed for 20 some years. So it's very important for us to know that he is connected, and the specialist who was helping made that happen to very ultimately lead us to have Keiko in the new gate to really find out what he has to put up with and if he can do it. And our team was so dedicated to make that happen. So can we have the new gate? Here we go.
There is a critical next step to Keiko's training, something as simple as teaching him how to leave.
C'est la porte de la liberté. The gate of freedom.
Ironically, The techniques used to teach Keiko independence are the same ones used for all captive whales with some exceptions. Keiko is encouraged to think for himself and never punished, only rewarded. In spite of all his training, he is cautious of new things. The technique used for the prototype gate is point-to-point training, calling Keiko with a slap of the pole, then giving him the signal to go to the next pole, which is on the other side of the gate. Keiko finally agrees, but does it his way.
There it is.
Eventually, he figures it out.
There it is. Hey, smart whale. There we go. All righty.
It's possibly a big step.
So it's literally amazing that thanks to our team, Keiko learned to be able to understand that ultimately, if he was going through that gate, he would have an opportunity to have more space. And that really leads me to raise questions, because as we see, Keiko is very sensitive, like any marine mammal, dolphins and whales, to acoustic, to sound underwater. But the team that spend a lot of time above water taking Keiko is giving direction to it, telling him to go over there, go over there. And so that was vision, obviously, like us, which is our primary sense. So I was very, very surprised and very well educated to understand that we can also communicate with marine mammals visually. And so that to me was very important. And Jeff, please tell us a lot more about what that means and how you handle it. I mean, this is incredible.
Well, that was the thing, Jean-Michel. You know, this is the first time anything like this had ever been done. So there was a lot of unknowns. So we went into this with a real positive attitude, with the thought of whatever they throw in front of us, we'll try to overcome. And Keiko was such an outstanding animal. He rose to every occasion that we presented and put in front of him. And he became a family member to all of us who worked with him. And you have these animals that are the top of the food chain in the oceans, and probably one of the top predators that's ever lived. And to develop a language that you can communicate with that animal with, to ask them to do things that you would like them to do, it takes some time, and you need to condition them to do that, and that's where the training comes in. So little things like the gate training to get them to swim through the gate, they're naturally cautious, these top predators, but it's a very small increments that we go by to do the training. So it's little steps that we get them to do one thing to another, like swimming through the gate. And ultimately, swimming through that gate was his access to freedom. And as I say before, this was the first time that anything like this has been done. And our staff had a lot of heart, and we brought people in from all over the world to help with this project. And it was fun to watch how it progressed.
Well, to me, that's a great way of understanding and education. And let's remember, this was about 19 years ago or so. And so we're learning a lot. And for me, to know that Keiko was able to understand and little by little learning and doing what he was taught to understand and learn, that was amazing. So we had to think about, if we're going to get Keiko out of the small space in which he is in the bay, like him to explore the bay as well. So we need to make sure that we have a way to close it completely So if he by any chance goes out of his bed, he can go out to. So can we look at the next video, please? Here we go.
Finally, over 200 buoys and a net over 900 feet long are in place and need only to be secured. The rest now seems easy, installing the familiar gate in the barrier net that will eventually open to the ocean world beyond and give Keiko a choice. For now, Keiko's world is about to become 20 times bigger. The bay itself. It will be the first time ever that we can't monitor his every move, every hour of every day.
Well, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It was really exciting time, you know, and to take that next step. You know, when we got to Iceland, we didn't know what to expect. You know, we thought maybe his instincts would kick in. And if you heard vocalizations from wild whales, he'd want to try to get out. But after that first year we were there, we realized that the wild whales weren't coming in close enough to the bay, into the harbor where we had Keiko, so that we have to go to the whales. And that's when we started working with the conditioning and get him ready for the next step, which would be the boat training and the boat walks. And so that could give us the ability to be able to go out and take him out to the areas where the wild whales were, and then go neutral with the boats, turn off the engines, and then just let him listen. And that was what we were working towards. And so this was kind of our first step. But there was some things that came up in Iceland and in Vestmannaeyjar that pressed that situation. And so we had to do it a lot sooner than we were hoping to. And they were going to be doing some dynamiting in the harbor. And so that training for Keiko to leave that harbor so he wouldn't damage his ears was so important, because their hearing is so critical to their survival in the wild. And for him taking that first step into the wild, we needed to have him have every sense that he had. And so when they were talking about expanding the harbor and doing the dynamiting, we knew we had to get him out around the corner. And so it pushed us a little harder than we were ready, but Keiko was ready, and so we nervously, you know, trained him in the bay, knowing that, you know, what is he going to do once he gets outside the net.
Well, at first he went into that bay and discovered things that he had never seen before, since he was 2 years old. And he was reconnected with the real environment. So that to me was interesting, to see him off the bay pen and swim through the bay. Could we have that, Jim? And I think we'll then go on to the weather issue.
Then at last, it's time for Keiko's great adventure. Not since he was 2 years old has he known a natural environment. It's 23 years since he's seen the bottom of the sea.
Well, that brings us to ultimately the issue with the weather that takes place in Iceland. And I don't know how much experience you had, Jeff, when you were there about that, but you may want to tell us a little bit, because I was lucky enough not to have to put up with it.
Well, that was one of the biggest challenges in Iceland, is that it was the weather. And when you're dealing with a project like this, you know, the weather can be pretty extreme at times, but in Iceland, it takes it to a whole nother level. So in our first year and a half we were there, we had 150 hurricane force storms. That's winds of excess of 70 miles an hour. So we were having winds of over 70 miles an hour about every third day. And we had winds as high as 200 miles an hour on the south end of the island we recorded. So it was always a challenge. And during those winter months, it was really difficult. And so what was a hindrance was that we weren't able to get out in those winter months because of the light. There was no light. It was only, we had a half-hour twilight in the middle of winter. And plus the weather was just so extreme that we just couldn't do it. So our windows were our summers. So we had very short windows to be able to prepare him and get him out there and be ready to interact with those wild whales.
Well, Jim, if we can, to
weather.
go the experience that Jeff had to put up with and his team, I wasn't there at that time, but I came later. The weather.
Jim there?
All the weather.
Yeah, I'm looking for it, guys. It seems to have disappeared on my laptop here. So why don't we, if we could just move forward just a moment to, let's say, making the tag.
Sure. Is it the tag was another critical component to this, and one of the things with the tag. Well, we'll just start with the tag. We'll show them what they're doing, and then we can talk about it later.
The day is coming when we hope Keiko will be on his own. To monitor him in the wild, we need to design a satellite tag that will emit a signal every time he surfaces, reporting his location and the depth of his dives. We plan to watch him from space. A cast is made of his flopped dorsal fin, something we always thought was the result of captivity and spending so much time at the surface. The cast will undergo fluid dynamic tests to determine the best hydrodynamic design for the tag and for Keiko.
Yay.
Yeah. So that the tag was such a critical component too. One of the things that we didn't want was if Keiko was to swim off and not be able to sustain himself out in the wild. And, you know, for him to starve to death out in the wild would be a really cruel and inhumane thing. So the tag was a really important part of that. And so that was one of the things that I'm real proud about is so we pushed the technology in tagging these cetaceans to further than it's ever been. And we're using these tags today to study these animals and get baseline information. So that tag also gave us, and it told us how deep he's diving, how fast he's swimming, and where he's going. So those were really important things that we needed to know so that we could train him to meet the criteria for the wild whales. And we also did wild research on the wild whales and got that same information. So that was, our training was always tied in with what we'd learned from the wild population.
Hey guys,
Well,
so I think I could find some weather video if we're ready.
Right. Yeah, throw it at us.
Weather video. Well, that was bad news.
For Keiko, exploring the world beyond the net is about to be delayed again. 42 large buoys of the barrier net are dragged under by currents up to 8 knots. Bolts driven 2 feet into the rock must now hold the net, as Keiko is recalled to the bay pen when the storm hits in full fury. And I am not surprised to learn what the sea has delivered to us.
Well,
that was even a bad day. Yeah, the weather conditions there were extreme, and it was surprising. People just don't understand it. At 140 miles an hour, the wind will pick your legs up, and so you can actually hang onto a railing, and your legs will flag. And we didn't know how Keiko would respond to these conditions. He'd been in a concrete pool for most of his life, and with no weather at all, really. And so the first week we were there, we had our first storm of over 100 miles an hour, and the young staff was terrified because they'd never seen a storm like that. And Keiko, on the other hand, was loving it. He had his pack up, and the spray was hitting like a shotgun blast. It was just skimming off the water so fast. But he loved it. He was breaching. He was lifting his packs up. He was doing tail lobs. So Keiko did much better in the weather than we did, and that was really good to see.
and then soon he had to experience going into the open ocean, right?
That's right. And that was because of the dynamiting, that we had to get him ready to get him around the corner. And again, we didn't know what to expect. And we had this incredible animal, and he had so much trust in us, and we just didn't want to let him down. And one of the things I feel really good about is that, our good relationship, we maintained that throughout the project.
Could we have him go in the ocean now?
Yep.
Thank
This is
you.
really fun.
The big day arrives, ready or not.
Governor, Bay 10, this is the happening. We are in position. The gate is open.
The rest is up to Keiko.
The gate to freedom. Yay.
Now we have to get him as far from the harbor and the explosions as possible. We have to take a whale for a walk in the ocean and hope he'll stay with us. We quickly fit him with a radio tag in case we have to track him. Whatever happens, Keiko is truly home.
It still gives me chills.
What happened after that?
Well, that first time out we didn't know what to expect. And the very first time out, we went out and got them around the corner, and they let off their charges in the harbor there. And about the time they let off the charges, we spotted some dolphins, white-sided dolphins, off in the distance, or white-beaked dolphins, I guess they were. And Keiko focused on them. So that was his first chance of really hearing other cetaceans and being close enough proximity that he knew that there was other of his broader kind there. And it was really fun to see. And he followed us back in, and he trusted us just like we trusted him to do what we asked him. And it was really an exciting moment. And that was kind of the start of our taking him out there and getting him exposed to the wild whales.
What happened shortly after that?
I'll let you fill that one in.
I want to see him trying to connect with other orcas.
And that was really exciting. So at our first, first it was the white beaks, and eventually we took him out there and got him in close proximity with the wild whales. And again, we didn't know what to expect. We were hoping his instincts would kick in. But what we know today that, most we know more about these animals, that they're not very instinctual, that most of their learning is through observation from their parents and siblings and other relatives. And so that was something that we did learn from this project, that it's a lot easier to take these animals out of, it's a lot easier to catch these animals and put them in captivity than to take them from captivity and put them back into the wild. But here's the first step.
So can we see the next one, please,
Yeah.
Jim?
Please.
Yay.
The whales don't seem aggressive, and Keiko approaches again, so close. Suddenly, it's all over.
Well, that I ask you why he was approaching others and then he went away.
Yep.
Are there reasons for that? Is it acoustic? Is it being scared, or what's going on?
Well, that was the crazy thing, Jean-Michel, is that Keiko was caught between two worlds. He was caught between his natural world, where he came from originally when he was only 2 years old, but then he had 20 some years in this other world that we provided him. And that was, he didn't know if he was a whale or a person, I think, at this point. And so that first encounter was we were so excited about it. We finally got him up close. He had this encounter, but it was very brief. And that was just, it broke our hearts, because we were just so hopeful that he'd swim off with the group and eventually integrate into that family. But what we know today is that these family structures are so tight and so tightly bonded that they don't usually go from group to group. But we didn't know that at the time. And it was really exciting. So it's hard to say. And that was one of the things that was, we could never predict. We had photo ID'd all the other pods in the area, and we knew which pods that we thought that would be the best ones to bring Keiko to. And so we take him out to those pods, go neutral and turn off the boats and let him hear that group. And then he'd oftentimes swim out to that group, and sometimes that group would swim to him. Sometimes they would chase him. Sometimes he would chase them. You just never could predict it. It was every single day was different. So we were left scratching our heads, but you could tell that Keiko was thriving on this contact from these wild animals, and that physically he was in such good shape, and he was a different animal than the animal that we had in Newport. This animal was closer to a wild whale.
Well, I remember very well when Keiko was coming with us. That was later on. He stayed with the boat wherever we were going, and he would go and test other orcas and find out if he wanted to be with them or not. And often, at that time anyway, he decided to turn back and be with the boat. And one day, of course, he felt a little better with others. So to me, that was absolutely fascinating. And then a long time later, I had the privilege of being back exactly where everything was happening. And that morning, the tag battery was changed. And my better half and I, we were on a boat with the team, and we took Keiko out. And we wanted to know if Keiko wanted to leave. And we approached other, maybe 10 orcas. And Keiko ultimately felt very comfortable to be with them. And we stayed there for maybe 2, 3, 4 hours. It just went on. And then they ultimately, they started moving. And Keiko, because of the tag, we knew where he was, how deep he was going. The scientists knew all of that. And Keiko was gone. And I had this immense privilege for me to see that Keiko was free back to his world where he was born, and he was on his way. And maybe we can see the next video, which will make us feel very good about that. And then, Jeff, you can tell us what happened after that.
Yeah.
Here's Keiko.
And you can see how Keiko's oriented towards the wild whales. And that's how he'd do it. He'd track them. He'd just follow them and follow them. And then eventually kind of follow with them, or they would follow him, or you just never knew what to expect. And on this day, he swam off, and the weather conditions started changing. And so the team that was out there had to leave because it just got too rough. And we can be out there, and we had some large boats and good watercraft and everything. But when the Icelandic weather turns, it gets very, very dangerous. And once the seas get over 20 feet, and with a small boat, it's very, very difficult. So Keiko was on his own, and then maybe we could show the route that he took. And that's one of the things that the tag gave us, was he gave us information where he was, which was always nice to have.
Well, tell us. That's where he went. And
Yeah,
I didn't
so
know.
he eventually worked his way up north of the Faroe Islands and eventually to Norway. And I think it took about 4 weeks to get there. And he showed up in a small little bay over there, and surprised some of the people that were in the bay, and came over, and it was in the summertime, and we right over to it.
And that was 7 weeks?
7 weeks total. He was out on the water for 3 weeks before he left Iceland, and then 4 weeks on his travels to Norway.
Huh. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I am very impressed. And Jeff, if you have something to tell us that the public would like to know more about, that'd be great. And maybe they can see the entire show, which to me was one of the most emotional experience in my entire 75 years of scuba diving.
It was such a incredible project, and I still get chills about it today. And it was something that had never been tried before, and we didn't really know what to expect, and we learned a tremendous amount from it. And I'm often asked, was it worthwhile? Was it a success? And it depends on how you gauge a success. In my opinion, it was a huge success. I mean, we developed tags that are being used today to get baseline information on really rare species like beaked whales and blue whales and all sorts of species. We developed the first photo ID catalog in the North Atlantic. We did genetic work up there, acoustical work. We developed underwater imagery and pushed those limits as far as we could. But probably the most important thing that came out of the Keiko Project and his legacy is probably going to be the Whale Sanctuary Project. And that we're put together a team of people with the hopes to be able to retire some of these captive animals into a better environment. And that's one thing that we do know, is that when we took Keiko out in Newport and brought him to Iceland, that he thrived. He did extremely well. He got physically fit. His dorsal fin started to come up a little bit. We'd take him for boat walks, 60-mile boat walks. He was an amazing animal. He was a totally different animal than we had in Newport. So it was it was an amazing project. It was we still carry it very warmly in all of our hearts, and it was a nice, wonderful project to be part of.
Well, Jeff, for me, obviously you're a perfect example of somebody who dedicated himself, since you are still trying to make sure that all these marine mammals that are in captivity on the planet are being put back into a natural environment for them to be reconnected with that environment. And I'm glad you are at home right now, because otherwise you would be in northern Canada and
Yes.
up there where the whales are going to be put, the whales and dolphins will be put in freedom in their natural environment. You would be freezing yourself.
But I'm used to it, and it's a worthwhile project.
Anyway, so we probably have questions now
Yeah.
to see what we can answer if there are any questions.
Please.
Great job, guys. That's really enjoyable. And we have lots of comments. We have lots of people from all over the world. We have viewers in Italy, France, Orca, that's Blair, New Zealand, Ingrid Visser. We have Charles Vinnick, Executive Director of Whale Sanctuary Project. We have viewers in Washington, Alabama, British Columbia, New York, Monterey, and I'm sure many more. So that's really wonderful. Thank you all for attending. And there are questions. Let me find some here. Let's see, and lots of former Keiko team members, like some of that I just mentioned, that are excited to see Keiko's images and the other members and both of you. So there's questions about, is there a priority list of orca in captivity that would be ideal candidates for release into sea pens?
There's a lot of candidates out there, and there isn't an ideal candidate. I think all of them would make good candidates for a CPEN. What CPEN does is it gives these animals this acoustical link to the natural environment. It's one of their main, senses that they have is their hearing. And to take that away and put them in a concrete pool with very little stimulation, that it takes away one of their major senses. So even taking an animal from a concrete pool and putting them into a natural setting, I think is much more enriching than being in a concrete pool. So I think I'm hoping I'm answering the question.
You mentioned one earlier today that you were working on. Can you talk a little bit about that project?
Well, we're actually working on a number of different projects. The Whale Sanctuary Project we're currently working with the Canadian government and working on permits, and we're starting a blue whale sanctuary in Nova Scotia. And that we're hoping to start construction as early as this next summer. So we're really excited about that. We've also been working with other animals. So we've been working with working with the Lummi tribe to bring back Lolita or Tokatai and our Scalicachinat, if you're Lummi. We're trying to bring Lolita home to the Northwest waters in the Salish Sea, and that's going pretty well. And we're trying to provide a better home for some of these animals that have been, working their entire lives and performing shows, and we're trying to just give them a chance to go back to the wild, the last days before they go back to the wild. And so we're excited about that, and it is, in my feeling, definitely it's the best thing for these animals if we can provide them with a more natural setting.
If I may jump in,
Please.
I'd like to add one little thing, saying that Keiko should be an example in the minds of every human being on the planet. An orca, which was 2 years old, separated from his mother, ultimately ended up in Mexico City in high altitude in a tiny little pool, which was artificial salt water, and eating some frozen fish, and on and on and on. And ultimately, after all these years, it ultimately made it back to freedom. So there is hope for the majority of these marine mammals that are dolphins and whales that are being kept in captivity. We didn't know then, now we know. It's not an issue of criticizing or accusing people. It's the fact that we are evolving, we are learning, we're becoming better as a species, and we're learning a lot from those dolphins and whales. And people need to keep that in mind we're not there to point fingers. That's not the issue. We're there to help. And that's what we're doing and what you're doing, and you dedicated and together with many other people.
That's great. So there's a question that relates to how orcas have different, and orcas in different populations have different dialects of communication. And when they're taken out of the wild and put together in captivity, whether it's in entertainment situations or when you guys move them back into a whale sanctuary enclosure, how does their different dialects affect their ability to communicate with each other?
I'm not a scientist, and I'm going to let Jeff answer that, but I'm going to say orcas are like humans. They're different species, different dialect, different part of the world where they've adapted differently than they would somewhere else. And that's why there's so much differences, and that's why it's so fascinating, just like the human species.
They are a lot like us. And like Jean-Michel says, saying, they are a very social animal. They learn from their teachers. They, there's some instinctual parts of that, obviously, but for the most part, they learn like us. So that's, we have to think about that when we think about, taking these animals from the wild and putting them in these captive situations. Some animals do very well in captivity, but animals like that are highly social and highly intelligent, they don't do as well. Elephants and great apes and whales. These animals probably shouldn't be in captivity. But like Jean-Michel says, we've learned a lot. We learned that we can manage them, we can house them, but we can't provide them the quality of life that they have in the wild. And that's one thing that they miss. And so if we take these animals, out of the wild, put them in a captive situation, and then expect them to work, in some cases, like Lolita, for 50 years, what do we do with these animals at the end of their lives? We should be able to, Lolita's been working for 50 years, every day. And now maybe it's time to think about retiring her. We all get to do it. Maybe we should do it with another species, and do the right thing. And that's what we're trying to do.
Very nice. So is there a sea pen ready for Tokatai off Orcas Island or anywhere up there?
Not yet, but we're working on that, and we have some sites identified, and one, actually there's two of them on Orcas Island. We are working with the Lummi to try to purvey some land, and it is our hope to be able to bring her back. She's the last southern resident in captivity, and the southern residents haven't been doing very well over the last 10, 15 years. We're down to 74 animals. And so this would be a way to be able to raise awareness to apply to the southern residents if we bring her back. And it also gives us an opportunity to learn more about these species. And anytime we do a project like the Keiko Project, we learn so much more. And sometimes we don't realize it at the time, but when you look back on it, what we learned 20 years ago, a lot of these tools we're still using today.
Thank you. Very good answer. What advice would you give to kids who want to work with helping reconnect captive whales and dolphins to sea pens? How can they be a part of this great movement?
Jean-Michel?
Well, personally, it's sharing with them all the experience that we have had, showing them video, very short little video. We have a lot of that to share with them, for them to learn and understand and do things that they want to do. And I'm happy to say that unlike maybe 20 or 30 years ago, there's lots and lots of young people. And your daughter, watch out, she's 5 years old, is going to want to do what you've been doing, and in a much more efficient way, thanks to people like you and scientists all over the planet who have dedicated themselves to pass on. And that's why we have our program, Ambassador of the Environment, which fortunately is in different hotels, Ritz-Carlton particularly, in different places. And we can share with visitors and their children a lot of information about what we can do, what they can do, what they can tell their parents to do to make sure that we do everything we can to protect these creatures because we're learning from them, the environment depends on them, and we all connected. So children are the formidable resource, and I call them the decision makers of tomorrow.
Very much so.
And also they can follow the work at the Whale Sanctuary Project with Jeff and Charles Vinnick that is leading the effort to create places for captive whales to be placed after their entertainment lives have ended. And
Yeah.
I have another question here, and that is, what would you think is the greatest threat to orcas in their ecosystems today?
Boy, there's so many of them out there. Overfishing is by far is probably in the Northwest is the biggest problem. But you know, the chemicals that we're putting into the waters, the things that we don't even think about, you know, that are being dropped into the Seattle area, around the coastlines everywhere. You know, we have been treating the oceans like a trash dump for years, and the oceans is life, and we can't keep doing that, and that is. We just can't keep doing that. You know, we lost 75% of the animal species on the planet in the last 50 years. You know, what's going to happen these next 50 years? We have to look at things a little differently than we have been. And one of the things that Jean-Michel is really good about is unlocking the passion with people that he touches. And, you know, you are such a good spokesperson and such a hero for the cause, Jean-Michel. And thank you.
Well, for me, it's a great opportunity today to communicate with the public because I didn't know when I was a young person, the trash, okay, we're very sensitive to that because of visually, that's our primary sense. But what about what we never talk about? What about chemicals and heavy metals? And as I've said in the past, symbolically, you take a tablet of aspirin to take care of your headache. What happens to that chemical? It goes in the ocean. So there are now huge, huge opportunities for young people to create and invent ways of capturing all these runoffs before they go into the ocean and take these chemicals and heavy metals and not treat them as waste, but as recycled and create other products that we can do that. And I think we will head up that way. And that will protect the ocean, which we all depend upon, whether it's plants or animals in the ocean. And it's amazing what I wish I was 15 years old today, thinking and knowing what I know today, thinking about what to do for the future.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? Me too. I wish I was 15 and being able to start all over again.
Yeah.
No, now.
We have a few more minutes and a few more questions. There is a question here that is, what's the difference between a sea pen and a sanctuary environment?
Well, sea pen is more confined because you can only make a sea pen so big. Also, it's not touching the bottom, so there's a net on the bottom. The sanctuary, actually, you're in that environment. So the animal has a chance to interact with fish on the bottom, crabs, whatever, as well as birds, anything that comes into that environment. So there is a big difference. You can't make a sea pen big enough for these animals, but we can provide sanctuaries that give them enough space to be able to hunt live fish if they want and explore areas all day long and never get bored. So it's I think that's the next step is a sanctuary. We have it for all these other species, but we don't have it for whales and dolphins just yet.
Here's a great question, I think, and that is the reason for the sea pen for Tokatai a financial issue? If so, Cher donated $400,000 to help get Kavan, an elephant placed in a sanctuary in Cambodia. Can we help financially if this is the reason?
Well, always, finances are always a problem. There's a lot of heart out there, and there's a lot of people wanting to try to do the right things, but it's really hard with nonprofits, especially in these challenging times, to maintain the level of commitment that they often need to do. So it is, we are trying, but it is challenging with this last year, and who knows the future is going to bring. But we are very hopeful, and we think that once we start our capital campaign, that we will get a lot of support when we do it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jean-Michel and Jeff. It's really great to have you part of our festival today and to answer questions and to share these videos. Do you have a parting statement, either one of you?
Protect the ocean and you protect yourself.
There we go.
Yeah, and stay safe and follow your passion.
I love both of them. So thank you all for attending. We appreciate your support. We have 2 more films and live discussions that we'll be presenting within the next month or so. That would be My Father the Captain, Jean-Michel Cousteau, and Swain's Island, one of the last jewels of the planet. You can find us on oceanfutures.org. We have lots of social media on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, so you can find out more about us there. And we'll sign off now until our next live event. And thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you. Stay safe, Jeff.
You too. Always good to see you, Jean-Michel. Can't wait for the next adventure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.